I think we have a way to give people superpowers here if we play our cards right, and that's really what I want to do.
People aren't aware, I think, of how easy and accessible these tools and these ideas and these possible futures are.
You don't have to learn how to train a model and how to curate data for yourself just to have a model that's fit to you.
I firmly believe that open source AI is the key to a positive future for humanity. It might sound a little hyperbolic, but as you start to look at the impact AI is going to have on society all over the world, it becomes even more important that we understand how these systems work. And when they're in the hands of a few organizations in this magical black box that we interact with, there's a lot of potential negative consequences. So in episode 53 of Tool Use, brought to you by ToolHive, we're talking with Alignment Lab AI. They're a lab that was born to democratize AI through radical transparency and distributed ownership. We're joined by Austin Cook, the CEO and director of the lab, Chris Hardwick, an AI developer, and Jordan Parker, marketing and business development. We're going to get into why open source AI is important, ways that people can leverage it today, and a strategy to get it into the hands of more people so we can make sure that humanity has a positive future. Let's get into the conversation with Alignment Lab AI.
I think it's important, at least right now, before we have sort of settled into what the technology is going to be. I think when we got our phones became that thing, and it's very difficult to change that once it sets in. And so, open source, because one, honestly, it's like a better business model than I was anticipating it being. It turns out like there's a reason Google's stuff is all free usually. But two, if you set good standards now before there is standards, the bar is just really high. And I think that's the least. I guess on the alignment front, right? Like this is the way to get the most sort of human-centric alignment, I think, is like aligned to the people and sort of create those high standards while we can.
What is alignment to you?
I think it's really not nuanced. I think it's an AI that does what you expect it to do when you expect it to do it, and you don't have unknown consequences from that, right? Like there's no secret stuff happening under the hood. It's not blackmailing your grandma. It's not doing a bunch of unexpected things and just looking like it's doing what you want. And I think that's pretty easy to hit. Like it's just hard to hit from the perspective of a company, right? Like if I'm trying to serve it to a billion people, like that is an entirely different problem than one person with their own model that's just fit to what they care about.
Open source components in tech and specifically in AI really had a lot of the same analogies I had across all the different industries that I worked in. Specifically, one of the last chapters of my life was in the agricultural space, and the decentralized food networks are facing the same challenges, the same issues, the same hurdles, and some of the same solutions that would apply, those same sort of patterns that I saw across all these other different types of industries about having access to the tools, about having a decentralized solution to whatever that is, and that having direct impact into the communities who can adopt that. We were experiencing the same thing with search. And so the same issues behind having a centralized power within search, within the social media platforms that we're all using, the same two or three, and now the same issues in the same 3 or 4 labs distributing AI to hundreds of millions every single day. We face the same sort of black box issue of not knowing, in particular, one, how much of your data you're trading, two, what the actual algorithm is being gamed for, and what are the ramifications of that 10 years down the road. And so everyone started playing the SEO games and early search, putting all the hidden words, keywords. So it's, whatever the incentives are going to drive the market. And in a competitive marketplace, that's always going to lead to unexpected outcomes in complex systems. And so we went from search to social to now AI, and it's this same sort of pattern taking place. And so I think overall, consumers and especially tech are much more privy to these issues, and we've had a few at-bats now culturally in the West. But I think, and we kind of talked on this before a little bit about the infrastructure and the resources actually being there to do anything differently. And whereas once somebody already has so much of the market like Instagram, there was no opportunity for any other social media platform like Instagram to take hold and to really expand from there. Whereas the kind of combination between hardware, software, open source models, that we're really at a crossroads where the majority of tech users and perhaps the early adopters in the sort of normie cycle of technology use have the opportunity to make different decisions, and have drastically different outcomes and experiences, and get to be in the driver's seat of what that looks like for them.
To reference our Instagram example, there were still other types of social media you can go to, but you're right, Instagram just totally captured the online photo album market. But with AI, it really feels like this is going to be people's interface to compute, their interface to information. Like it's going to be so much more all encompassing that making sure we don't have the same kind of entrenched structure that forces a singular direction for the vast majority of people accessing the internet seems incredibly important.
I mean, right? Like this is just software. What we're looking at. I think like there's a lot of abstractions, and it's very hard to comprehend what's going on under the hood, especially if you've never worked with it. But really, it's just because it's cheaper and faster if you can hit a button and have a thing that just makes a website than it is to make a website, right? And I think AI being uh, primarily a tool which just like lets you have the data that you want without having to construct it manually yourself. I think that's a way of just kind of turning everything into a button that's kind of labor intensive, at least in terms of digital content. And so, with the good and the bad that'll come with that, I think primarily, yeah, it's going to bleed into everything, right? Like it's just cheaper to do, and I think that's a good thing. I like that we're getting an overhaul. Things were pretty entrenched, right? Like they still are.
One thing that some people have apprehension towards the open source avenue with this is just strictly capability, where in order to make a website with a single click, you go to the Premier model or companies like Bolt v0, those type of things, because they're powered by the most cutting edge model and able to get the best output. So when they're trying to contrast the closed source state of the art versus open source, maybe they'll do a single attempt, see the results, and then walk away. How can we encourage people to explore these open source models more?
It's much easier to get a model to be very good at less tasks. And so the frontier models, like typically, they're made to be good at everything. And there's a lot of downsides to that. Like if you think of like trying to learn a language, you can learn a new language a lot easier than you can learn all new languages at the same time, right? And anything that you can have a frontier model doing that's not sort of an abstract kind of composite task like reasoning or something just very general, like a specific utilitarian use case, you can definitely do that with an open source model. Definitely for a lot cheaper and definitely like accurate almost every time, right? Like much better. As long as you're narrow and you target it well. And I mean, it's just an efficiency thing. The scale of the models goes up and the cost increases non-linearly, and that it becomes more expensive faster than it increases in parameters. And the frontier models are just gigantic. I mean, they're just enormous things that have to run on supercomputers. And a lot of the times it's like, man, I could use ChatGPT to code, and then I just go use like a glass of water per inference. And that was before it took like 10 minutes to go through all the tokens to get to your code. And it's like, or you could just take like, a very small model and just train it on your code and learn your libraries and your programming language. That's probably a much easier target to hit, and you get a much better code assistant out of it, right? And so I think it's about making maybe training accessible to people, or reducing the cost to customize the models, or automating a lot of the way the pain of that, the sort of technical hurdles. But then we'll get there. There's nowhere else to go but there, I think, as far as infrastructure.
And one thing that you kind of touched on with the efficiency aspect is the environmental concerns. People are getting more and more concerned that by leveraging AI for more tasks, because it's not the most computationally efficient process yet, it's just causing more and more like electricity being used, and if it's generated by unclean methods. How can open source help with this?
Resource constrained development in AI in particular has historically been very impactful, and it still continues to do so. I mean, I think while the models get bigger every day, they also get smaller. In that, I mean, look at Google's release yesterday, right? The Gemma 270 million, like very very small. And if you notice, they posted a benchmark with it. It's like, hey, this thing is like way smarter than like something that's much bigger. And that big thing that was much bigger was the last best model at this size, right? And I think that's going to keep happening because, like, while there is a hard stop on scale where it's like there just is not enough electricity beyond some point because you're paying those costs quadratically, on the inverse, compression, it seems like we don't even know where the floor is. It seems like we're just still compressing the models more and faster all the time. I think if you'd shown somebody from like 4 years ago that Gemma model that's 270 million parameters, they probably would have had a panic attack. Because I mean, it's fully conversational. The idea of something that you could train in a few hours on like a home GPU that's fully conversational. is what I mean. It's still absurd. If you ask me. I think that's where it's going to come from. I mean, this is just like when news research technique, and then they came up the sort of rope, right? Like the rope extension. There was that blog post where somebody had been. I was tweaking with the theta value for the rotary embeddings, and I think it's the only blog post that's like cited in a white paper. And then they just found out the models could just extend their context really, really long, which was like unheard of. And then it was like 4 or 5 days before a bunch of open source researchers got together and jumped on a supercomputer that was like doing open source research and trained out this big model, or this llama model, and released it that had like 1 million tokens of sequence length, and it was like the first sort of instance of that was like accessible and like computationally tractable to use. And so, I think that's going to continue to happen.
One area that I'm a little concerned about is just the societal trend towards not caring about privacy, where they've just put Alexa in their living room. They're happy with Gmail scanning every email that comes in and out. AI feels like it's going to amplify that risk. And with open source, we're able to kind of, keep things local, keep it secure. But what do you think about the general societal view towards it? Do you think enough people care that that's actually going to be something that is a selling point to open source? Do you think there needs to be something like a catastrophic data leak for people to wake up to it?
We've had seen the punchline for the joke that was social media. In that when it first started, it was like super cool and it was super bright and fuzzy and all that, and people willingly gave their data, like away, and it was then they were kind of putting like like in their heads, well, it's not real money, it's not real information, it's not going to hurt me. So I think like right now we're still seeing the effects of that, and still seeing the effects of people kind of we kind of convinced ourselves to not care so much about how much data was being taken, and now we're kind of in this boat where there's so much gone that we're like, well, I hope that doesn't do anything, so I'm going to continue believing like that doesn't, and what can I do about it now? And now when you talk to anyone, everyone knows that their phones and smart TVs and everything else is like spying on them. They just don't think about it. It's just like this baseline anxiety that everyone has. So one thing that we're doing with Center is we're trying to, and this could touch back on it, we're trying to redefine how people interact. Well, no, trying to really simplify how people interact with their computer, like in the first place. If we're able to get this, so it's like self-organizing, so it's like running your computer space for you, protecting your data and all that stuff for you. Now it doesn't seem like this monumental effort to take your data back from these big companies.
AI is new in the market as far as a product that you can sell as AI, but it's not a new product. Right? We've had it for years. This is what people talk about when they refer to the algorithm, right? It's recommenders. And I think recommenders have had like a tremendously serious impact on our sort of social organization, just as like a species. And it's because it's obscure and hard to comprehend. There's really no comeuppance, right? Like we don't really know how much data is getting taken from us because it's being taken in weird ways for weird abstract use cases to like organize these crazy systems to show ads around, right? And I think that's one benefit, I think, of it being so out in the open and starkly ridiculous as it is now with the chatbots, is that people are now aware that AI is absolutely a thing and that their data absolutely is valuable. And so if we can give people the tools to control what it is that they are sharing from like a first principle standpoint, from like, you don't have to be an expert to know how to go through Google's menus to find out what takeout is and like, all these other things to just remove yourself from that system. It should be, set up some other way where like if somebody wants your data, they should ask you for it. You should be compensated for it because it's valuable, because you capitalizing on that first should be the most important thing, especially if we're coming into this era where AI is being integrated into everything. You want your AI trained on your data, not trained on your behalf using your data, right? Like by some middle party. Because otherwise we're stuck right back where we began, right? Like just all of this entrenched sort of corporate interest on every layer of everything.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that Austin really highlighted here is this being an ephemeral, contextualized concept that really as a society we're kind of only waking up to over the last 4 or 5 years about how important data is, how it's being used, how it's being extracted. And I think on a broad scale, I would say most people aren't even, I would have to say like generally most people aren't even aware of the amount of data that they're giving away and how that's being utilized and funneled towards a profit model of some sorts. And I think if you were to extrapolate it towards an example of a market researcher standing in your living room and writing down notes about what your family does every day, you would have some sort of idea about like, hey, this is probably pretty weird. But then you have that person disappear and it happens to be contained in the device that's always on. And like Austin was highlighting about GPS and microphones and cameras and habits. I just don't think that there is a contextualized understanding of how encompassing it is across every digital medium, pretty much every device, smart TVs, smart refrigerators, your laptops, your phones. And I think to highlight something else that you were also talking about, Mike, is one of the issues of changing human behavior to some sorts. And so as a sort of the first overarching generation that has picked up technology and just ran with it without thousands of years of cultural design and education and getting to see its impact across other countries or other modalities of living, there's not like a course that we all went to in high school. This isn't a component of our understanding as a species for the last 50 years. And so a lot of this is, okay, how do you get the information out there? How do you educate people appropriately? How do you give them access to the resources and other options? And how do you essentially smooth the friction of that? And like we've talked about a bit in my background, just with agriculture, it's the same thing. Okay, well, how do you keep other people, how do you keep people from buying conventional monocrop foods when it's the easiest, it's the cheapest? Okay, well, people start to learn about subsidies and the fact that it keeps most farmers poor, and that if they weren't getting those subsidies, then it wouldn't actually be a system that's taking place. It's a centralized system, so the waste is there even more. So what do you do? Like Chris was highlighting, the grassroots components, right? You bring them closer to the source. You have more direct one-on-one access to the source, direct communication to those resources and those sources. And slowly it'll proliferate out into the communities, out into those different subcultures who are the early adopters, and out from there. But yeah, it's a multifaceted challenge across so many different touch points. And, we only have so much time, and there's so many issues and so many topics in the news cycle, and it's so fast that it's like, okay, maybe everyone's not freaking out about AI taking their job, but they haven't had the time or the opportunity to learn about how they're kind of contributing to the benefactors that are driven by market forces, that are driven by the incentives for profits, and not necessarily having that tangible contextual relationship to it, I think makes it just more challenging.
There's a reason that Google took a picture of every square inch of the surface of the planet, like on the ground and in space, like 10 years ago, right? Like, there's a reason that all their products are free. It's because, the data is the thing that's valuable. It's like the depth of information that you just create is so huge. And like, to some extent, it's not terrible. Like there's sort of a security through obscurity, in that you're one of billions of people who are producing untold gigantic volumes of data, because it's just cheaper to store data than it is to sort it. But what we're looking at with AI is like, now it's getting cheap to sort it too. And so it's probably time to like strap in, say, okay, well, let's manage this and curate it, like, because it's like a garden, right? Like, you keep your data well maintained and you understand it, and you know who's getting what thing, that becomes valuable for you, right? Because if all the labs, and I know this because I train AI, if all the labs only have the internet that's like publicly available to pull from, in 2 or 3 years, that's all going to be garbage. It's going to be a lot of cheap AI and like very low quality things in marketing, and just really difficult stuff that's going to be impossible to clean. And you don't have a human signal. You've only got worse AI than your AI to train on. So where do you get the data? Well, if everyone's curating it and managing it, it's theirs. You have to go buy it from them. And I would pay for it from people. I pay for data all the time. And so I'm sure that Google has the coffers, right?
I guess in a lot of ways too, this just not as a species having the contextual history of how to deal with this and what this looks like. There's not a marketplace for it almost, there's not the layman's ability to understand, okay, maybe I'm a farmer and I do this, my data's only worth this much, or I'm a CEO at a Fortune 500 company, my data's worth this much, and here's how I can sell it, and here's what it looks like. So I think part of the interesting part there is how much are we going to give away for free, and how much are we going to have the opportunity to kind of stop the bleeding where it's at and start to migrate to other options. And so, like Austin was highlighting, the tools have to be there; they have to be on par. And then going back to the education, like people just have to be aware of the situation. And I think that we stand a better chance now than any time in the last 20, 25 years to do anything about that, with the hardware being there, with software being there, with, a 270 million parameter model, just, swinging gloves. Yeah, I think it's been a long time coming, but I think the opportunity is better now than ever.
When we first hopped on the call, Chris was training a model as he goes, and that feels like a vital step to actually reach this proliferation where people can train their models easily. And in the previous episode, we had Evan Armstrong on with Augment Toolkit, which allowed you to train a model off of your own data. What do you think is needed to kind of make that more mass market? How can we get someone who's AI curious, maybe like a tech enthusiast, but not necessarily this level of developer expertise, to be able to confidently say, I want a model that can do this. I'm just going to do it.
There's projects that are coming out that are just going to morph around the user's workflow. I mean, like you already see those tools are, and like for anyone who uses Cursor, I think Windsurf does this too, where every once in a while just keep it like, like will pop up and say like, hey, it seems that you always run this like this, or just write that like as a rule, or like, like I see that you hit no telemetry every time I, like that. I'll just go ahead and just turn all that off for it and just do that and just do that in the future. AI is going to intuitively kind of form around the user's workflow and the user's personality and things like that. So right now we're at the stage where some could use Augment Toolkit or Aurora's or like whatever, and train up like their own model for their own for their own use case. It is a little technical, and as far as like, is it adding extra data or is it actually reasoning within that data? That's still a little fuzzy in some areas, but as far as the average consumer, when can they get an AI product that's going to make their specific workflow easier sooner than you think?
One massive benefit to open source AI is the ability to control your data. Now, when I use MCP servers, I also want to make sure that I'm safe with my data, and that's why I use ToolHive. ToolHive makes it simple and secure to use MCP. It includes a registry of trusted MCP servers. It lets me containerize any other server with one single command. I can install it in a client in seconds, and secret protection and network isolation are built in. You can try ToolHive too. It's free and open source, and as you know, I love open source. And learn more at toolhive.dev. Now back to the conversation with Alignment Lab AI.
We're actually selling these machines. We're AI engineers. We need a computer to handle our workflows and experimentations. It's got 20 terabytes of storage, 64 gigs of VRAM, $5,000. And I mean, it's good. So we really did a lot of optimization. It's actually the home lab setup that I've been curating myself. And now I've built a few of them. It's actually the machine that Mr. Chris is running on right now, that he was training a model on at the beginning. And it's also, it's just useful. It's just like a machine that's designed for, at least the build out is designed for this specific type of job. It's like you want a ton of storage, so you can hold your data sets. You want a ton of VRAM so you can do stuff with large models. You really want to optimize everything for training. And so we push them now with like a pretty light software stack. I mean, it's just Ubuntu, but we've already handled all the kernels and all the weird sort of flash attention oddities and sort of got everything nice and set up so that you can just train. And then we try to containerize that and put it aside. And over time, we're going to be building out on more of these tools, that we've been cooking on for 3 years now, much like Augment Toolkit, who actually, when I met Evan, it was very much similar to when I met Mr. Chris, where it was like, hey, here's this idea that I had. It's like, hey, here's this idea that I had. It's like, oh, these are all really similar. And so we've done quite a lot. I mean, we've taken a slow way about it, but we've really been trying to automate everything, and make the entire pipeline self-contained. And that way we don't have to do it for you. And when you're at home on your computer, you don't have to learn how to train a model and how to curate data for yourself just to have a model that's fit to you, And I think that's the place where we can go. But I think for now, just having the boxes is autonomy, right? Like just being able to say, hey, I'm going to go train a model on my own data that I collect and store it at my house, and I don't have to rent that from Microsoft or share it with anyone. It's just fantastically useful, especially if you're like a startup and you're like, I just need machines. I don't need a subscription service to like a $7,000 a month cluster of GPUs that I have to use all the time to make my money back on. I just need to run experiments to like just see what this is and how it works. I think that's a great way to do it.
Could you give a couple concrete examples? What type of experiments that people would want to run? What type of capabilities? What type of models? Like, if someone's like on the verge of going for a models that they're hosting or training in their own house or at their own business, what type of things can they expect to be able to do?
I think the sky's the limit. I mean, it's hard to say. It's like whatever you can capture with data, you can make a model do. I think there's obviously the compute constraint. It's just one computer, but I think you could do a lot with one computer. I think the thing that the industry kind of hides from the people that aren't like kind of in the weeds on it is how cheap the game actually really is if you're just optimal. You can't pay someone to be innovative, and so the labs wind up paying much more when they have much more money. Everything looks like it costs about $1 billion when you got $1 billion, but when you don't, it's not so dire. And I think as far as having the ability to just like automate your own tasks, run whatever you want in the open source, I think that's available, right? We're actually going to be pushing another sort of offer onto our page soon. Just it'll run the Kimi, the 1 trillion parameter model, all in memory. It won't all be VRAM, right? But you won't have to quantize it until it doesn't work either, right? It'll be that. So if you really want like a GPT-4 class model, like 1 trillion parameters, like even that's available to run like fairly cheaply. I mean, we're for the cost of, I mean, it'd be like a really nice gaming computer, but it's got a lot of GPU in it. It probably is a really nice gaming computer if you want to go that way with it. But I think this is the sort of thing that'll over time become cheaper, and so eventually the boxes will be discs, and they'll be flat, and then they'll be just be in the walls. I don't know.
I think we have the benefit too of being at a time when it's the kind of opposite. It's kind of the benefit of the commons as a piece of information is, it should only cost the one time to create. And so whatever sweat equity that somebody puts behind that, now we're actually all able to capitalize on. And so I think these software and AI components are going to become easier and faster, and you'll have your option between more specialized or larger, like Kimi 2, that's more capable across more domains. And so all we're seeing right now is the kind of unification of decades of sweat equity. And you don't have to wait for the big lab to do this one model that can finally write about the nuances of healthcare or the nuances of holistic management within regenerative agriculture. And that was one of the interesting things about just me kind of waiting for these tools to come up as somebody working parallel to the space, but never having the high-end skill set to do all the work myself. All right, but I can capitalize on all the work that's already been done and utilize that with whatever my company's trying to do, whatever my startup's trying to do. And so, yeah, I think we're at the point now of this really awesome crossroads where the hardware is cheaper than ever. It's better than ever. The companies like Alignment Lab are focused on distributing that and getting it out to the startups, the researchers, the developers, the high-end early adopters to help educate the masses on this connection of all these different resources coming together.
I get excited about the idea of being able to have a little box running where nothing leaves there. I can set up home automations. I can have the always on microphone and not have to worry about data being sent anywhere. It unlocks a lot of capabilities. I'm curious about what other type of persona. I fall into the camp of the experimental AI engineer, already leaning team open source and team local models. But who else do you think would be the type of person that would benefit from picking up one of these rigs and having set up, whether it's in their home or their business or something along those lines?
I think anyone concerned with privacy, right? I think anyone who's trying to leverage AI for an important use case that requires, the mixing of their personal information or just private information of their own. Like, I think this is a good way of dealing with it. As long as your computer is secure, your data is secure, you can do it on, like, turn the internet off, And having the ability to do that, I think, is not as common as it should be. Places like, hospitals and banks and things of that nature have their own infrastructure for dealing with such things, but it's very inaccessible and very large and expensive. And so I suppose, like, other than sort of startups, maybe companies concerned with privacy, maybe just the lone sort of hacker engineering type, I think overall it's one of those things where it's going to become important for everyone. I think right now it's important for us. I can't say like if the sort of impact of access to AI scale compute at a local level will change the shape of the industry quicker than it would be safe to make bets.
This is going to shape every industry. So to answer your question, really everybody. AI is going to touch every industry. So it's really going to come down to. I mean, I really hope to see a nation of decentralized local AI boxes instead of everyone going to the same Gemini and ChatGPT for like their solutions. And I think those who get ahead of it now are going to see an exponential return in the job market in the next 5 to 10 years. It's ramping up faster and faster and faster. So I mean, like to answer the question, who can benefit from this? Anyone who anyone who works for a living, anyone who needs to get anything done like in the future, literally everybody.
And one thing Austin's brought up in the past is what happens when you can't rent a GPU? What happens if they're either the demand's too high or you just happen to not fall into some company's favor and you don't have access to it? As we move into this next era, the AI age, that's going to be a vital component, and that can be gatekept away from us.
Yeah, I think it's very lucky for us that there are as many 3090s in circulation as there are. I think a 3090 is still like in the top few in terms of price per total amount of AI training compute that you can get out of it. And so, yeah, we should build it up while we can, right? Like, we don't know what the future holds, but we know that the market likes it when you have to pay them for access to things. And if that's going to be a barrier that risks something that's as important as your data and your sort of ability to interface freely with information, then we should probably get some compute in the houses. Although I'm hoping to make it cheaper than needing to spend $5,000 in the future. But right now, I think $5,000 is more affordable than it was to run a model like at the scale that we can now.
What do you see as the roadmap, the vision? What is the direction that Center is going?
What I'm most excited about is the assistant center that I've been working on, that's going to live on these boxes, is that is personality. It is going to watch you and it's going to change its own personality and workflow to work around the user, while also at the same time helping to organize the user's life and workflow and take raw, messy human data and turn them into actionable plans that work towards the user's goals. So this is an example of AI living symbiotically with humans.
The plan, I think, for the outset, at least to me, has always been to build the things that I was most greedy for. I think I want the Tamagotchi that learns on its own based on just whatever I'm doing, that I don't have to do any work to do. I wouldn't say that the angle that we're pursuing is something where my grandmother is going to fundamentally be excluded from the product that we're building forever, right? I think right now it's technical, because right now it's just technical time. Like, the industry's still adapting and the technology's changing every 5 minutes. But as we settle down, I think, and we continue to learn the very interesting things that we've learned so far about sort of how to do this optimally, and begin to implement more and more of the systems that we've been designing, that we've been building, what it's going to look like for the end user is something very simple. Like, they just having a computer that kind of understands them, and not in a way that's sort of like ChatGPT, where it's just kind of remembering like whatever the list of recent facts are that you had said, but something that is actually built out of your data and sort of curated over time to help you be as productive as you can be about things you care about, right? Like, and knowing sort of what the questions are that you would ask if you could think of them, and answering them for you before you have to ask them, sort of that level of enablement. Because I think we have a way to give people superpowers here if we play our cards right, and that's really what I want to do. I think there's a phenomenon that we in this room are all aware of that people who are outside of the space are not, wherein we've seen what happens when people use AI right, and they just go through this cascade of just like self-actualized progress in every single direction. I mean, they just become completely and very much enabled to just sort of interface wherever they need to and know what to do, like when to do it. And I think, like, if we can just, that takes a lot of work though, right? Like, that takes like a lot of understanding of sort of the cleanliness of the data that you're getting, kind of how, well, I guess that's just like an analogy, right? But when I say cleanliness of the data, but I mean, like, in reality, this should be accessible to everyone. You can talk to the freaking things. It shouldn't be a difficult, technically challenging interface. And so if we can give that to everyone, I think that we'll have plenty of room to gloat about the alignment name.
I think it really highlights a lot of the things that we're discussing here and bringing together like the simplified version of alignment that it does, that AI does what you think it would do, or what you expect it to do. And so, kind of like the self-improvement, or the phrase goes about, treat yourself like somebody that you're taking care of, right? So if your AI treated you like somebody it was trying to take care of, how would it help you in these ways? And I think just any AI software company heading down that direction is probably going to do well in the next several years, if not at least financially, at least do well for the tangible good that they're producing out of their customers, their subscribers, their community base.
So I am thrilled that you guys are working towards this. I think the vision laid out is what we need. I think that the plan to execute with getting people the hardware they need along with the software and gradually implement this on a wider scale is exactly the right path. How can people help? How can developers, enthusiasts, people who also want to see this future help ensure it happens?
I think that the incentives are such that if you are able to build AI, you're able to build safe AI. And if you have a reason to build AI and you are in the open source, you're just not sort of incentivized to do that beyond whatever the thing is that puts you crazy enough to stare at numbers long enough to be able to do it in an innovative way and on new things, then we should be okay trusting that generally the state of open source software will be as it's always been, in that it is generally just made to be useful for as many people. It's designed to build products on. It's designed to build good tools and things that are available for people fast as possible. Because I don't think the idea of the open source is fundamentally incompatible with like a business model. Like I think I get a lot of conversations where the assumption is like, oh well, you care about open source, but like how do you make money? And I'll just go back to Google again, right? Like Google open sources everything they do because like being infrastructure is really valuable. And I think right now we don't have that. And so until we have like a stable bed of infrastructure, that's all there is to build. And so whether or not it's going to be safe really comes down to like, well, are we going to let our infrastructure become this sort of duct taped together pile of API keys and sort of rented services from ephemeral compute at like a premium, or are we just going to do the cheaper thing and, just buy the box and run it at your house so you don't have to worry about it as a bill and like get your tools so that you don't have to pay for them every single hour of the day. And I think just enabling people to be able to do that in a non-exploitative way is all you have to do to get safe AI out of it.
I think a lot of this comes back to the lack of robustness in a centralized system, right? So how do you have safe AI? You can't have the same sort of safe standards across a billion people in North America, or like across the West. Like it's not going to be the same use case. It's not going to be able to help the same people. So as a uber generalist model or uber generalist provider of AI, that's going to be the limiting factor there. So being able to decentralize it, bring it back to the individual contextually relevant use cases is truly how we're going to find the safety in that. It's going to happen by itself, right? And same thing like Chris was talking about with the complex community that is open source. It is a self-organizing system in some sort. And if you do not have the technical chops or skills to contribute to that, being a user of what tools matter to you, I think is just as useful. Because if somebody builds the perfect open source software, but nobody uses it, how perfect is it, right? But if you lack those skills, perhaps finding the 80-20 for yourself, that is the most important across your values or your North Stars. And if there's a software that you can use, then use that and share that amongst your peers or your colleagues that are in the same market or industry. And so in the same way that we've had to shift other behaviors and modifications of technology as we've kind of found out about them, it's going to be a growing process. It's going to be a process of building the right tools for the right people, distributing those tools out, communicating, educating as much as you can, or just using what is most useful for you outside of the big labs, outside of the several providers of tech and AI at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a bubble right now. There's a lot of confusing products that are not really what they claim to be, or they're a scam, or they look like they're AI, but then they're not really that much under the hood, but like a API call to a frontier model that's just prompted. And I think like that's a lot to sort of try to parse out if you're like a business or just somebody who needs to adopt this to like keep keep up, or you're just interested in it. And I think one place that is always going to be a good signal is, well, what is in the open source that is popular? Because there's not a financial incentive for things to be popular in the open source. No one's buying ads for open source products, right? Like, it's just good and useful. And so it's proliferating based purely on that merit.
Open source is really a gift to the world, to humanity, because everyone gets to benefit from it. And if you get to benefit from it, which most people do, if any server you're using has Linux on it or whatnot, you get to reap the benefits. It really helps to pay it forward. And if all you have to do is use a product like, for local inference, something like Jan or whatnot, just these tools that are made in the public, in the open for the public to use, it just makes it better for everyone.
I think alignment comes from getting this in the hands of as many people as possible. That's kind of my bottom line, that humans are naturally good, and how we keep AI from going rogue is get in the hands of everyone as possible. And how we empower everyone is get it in the hands of everyone as possible. So believe in yourself and trust AI.
So we had to build the boxes because we're engineers and we needed something to run our workflows and our experimentation. They're $5,000, 64 gigs of VRAM, 256 gigs of RAM, 20 terabytes of storage. It's pretty spicy. They work pretty well. You can check them out. We have a website, alignmentlab.ai. And my word of advice to everyone is you should pay attention to your data. I think it's important. If you don't, I think you risk having to pay for something, I think, every day that you necessarily need, but you wouldn't otherwise have to pay. I think make money instead, I think, is an alternative that we can get, as long as we're just careful about sort of what we're doing and the consequences of our sort of consumer habits.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe seems cliche on like the highest level out of context to this conversation, but I think your actions actually matter. I think your choices actually matter. I think you actually have much more say in whatever conversation is happening in society. You just have to educate yourself a little and put a little more time into it. But I think across any part of life, you're going to reap the benefits from that. And I think this is the same thing. Your choices behind what tools you use matter. And I think your ability to talk about it, even amongst your friend groups and your peers in your business and your CMO or your COO, people aren't aware, I think, of how easy and accessible these tools and these ideas and these possible futures are,
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Alignment Lab AI. I know it was a bit heavier than most conversations, didn't the same pizzazz as our tool demos, but the work that Austin, Chris, Jordan, and the rest of the team are doing, I think, is very important. I think a lot of people who have issues with AI don't really realize that open source AI solves a lot of those issues. And if we can make sure that open source proliferates to more people with the use of Center and other AI tools, I think it's going to have a net positive for humanity. So I want to give a quick thank you to ToolHive for supporting the show so we can have conversations like this. And I really appreciate listening in, and I'll see you next week.